Yes, I condemn Hamas. Let's move on. The ousted Reza Shah Pahlavi's son is critical of Hamas, critical of Iranian regime, but his father was critical of pro-Israel lobby, but he is trying to appease Israel to drum up support for his return to power. President Jimmy Carter spoke about pro-Israel lobby. President Nixon said that America has to support Israel because of democracy. But we know Israel is a theocracy, not a real democracy. President Biden was more candid about it. He did say Israel had a strategic value, and he himself was a Zionist. So what is the real purpose of supporting Israel and Israeli interests?
As Iran inches closer to a nuclear weapon, Israel considers a possible military strike, and the international community looks to negotiate its way out of the threat. Exiled Iranian Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi calls that last part foolish thinking.
I have never believed that any type of negotiation with this regime that cannot be trusted could be a guarantee, or if you will, the safety mechanism on the gun. It has been, in my view, a waste of time.
The problem is you have to cure the disease, and the disease is what is the source of all this kind of radicalism and terrorism. And again, it ties back to the chief financier of groups like Hamas, which is, of course, the regime in Tehran.
But the ex-chairman of the British Conservative Party, Saeed Awarsi, doesn't agree.
I want to read something to you. This quote: anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support the bolstering of Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. That was Prime Minister Netanyahu in 2019, supporting Hamas.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
Arafat himself told an Italian newspaper, quote, Hamas is a creature of Israel. He even claimed that former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin admitted as much to him.
Surely, Your Majesty, you're not telling me that the Jewish lobby in the United States pulls the strings of the presidency?
Not entirely, but I think even a little too much, even for Israel interests.
You think the Jewish lobby in the United States is too powerful for the interests of Israel?
I think so. Sometimes they are disserving the interests of Israel because they're pushing around too many people.
How do you mean pushing around?
Well, pressuring. They have many means at their disposal. They are putting up pressure on many, many people. And at the end, I don't think that it will even help Israel.
Why, if this is true, why would the President of the United States pay attention to that lobby?
They are strong.
Strong in what sense?
They are controlling many things.
Controlling what?
Newspapers, medias,
Your Majesty.
Banks, finances, and I'm going to stop there.
Well, now wait just a second. You really do believe that the Jewish community in the United States is that powerful? They make the media reflect their view of foreign policy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They do not report, we do not report honestly?
Don't mix things, please. I don't say the media. I say in the media they have people. Not the entire media. Some newspapers will only reflect their views, yes.
No? The New York Times, for instance, is owned by the Salzburger family, who are Jewish. Are you suggesting that the New York Times is biased in its treatment of the question of Zionism, Israel's existence, the United States' relationship with the Arab world?
I will have to put all the articles of the New York Times written on this subject and draw the conclusion. You can put this to the computer and it will answer you.
What you're saying is that, yes, you do believe.
Well, let's wait for the answer of the computer.
Washington Post?
The same.
The networks?
Less.
Pro-Israeli groups have become active to make sure U.S. members of Congress who are supporting Palestine do not return to Congress after the next election.
A member of Congress did speak out, as I've just described, they would probably not be back in the Congress the next term. There's an inherent commitment in America, which I share as a Christian, of a deep commitment to make sure that Israel is safe. And that is added on to by the very effective work of the American-Israeli group called AIPAC.
How does the United States support Israel? Well, there's a history, and a very interesting one. It actually goes back a long time. One thing to remember is that Christian Zionism is a very powerful force. Woodrow Wilson was a devout Christian who read the Bible every day. So did Harry Truman. In the Roosevelt administration, one of the leading officials, Harold Ickes, once described the return of the Jews to Palestine as the greatest event in history. It's realizing the lesson of the Bible. These are deeply religious countries in which the biblical commands, so-called, are taken quite literally. Also, this is just part of colonization. This is the last phase of European colonization.
To make the case again about the end of the world. This time, though, he sees it coming from Iran.
As I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
Right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men, when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value?
United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel, as you know. They're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment. A moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area.
Look at the Middle East. I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
More than a dozen attorneys general have signed on to a threatening letter against journalists covering the war in Gaza. Now, Fox News Digital says that the prosecutors signed on to a letter that was sent to media outlets, including the New York Times, Reuters, CNN, and AP News, and basically put them on notice that providing material support to Hamas is illegal. Now, none of these organizations there's been no indication that any of these news organizations have provided material support to Hamas. What does that even mean?
The latest victim is Elon Musk.
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f*** yourself.
But
go f*** yourself.
Sorry to say that your mass media, the Western mass media, always beside the Israelis. Your baby in this area.